Good morning, everyone. For those who weren't here today, my name is Carla Patrocínio. I'm not a Work Package 7 coordinator, but Pedro Lurti, who can't be here with us today because of health problems. So I'll just start my presentation. In summary, I'll review the goals of this work package. Then I'll introduce the participating institutions. We'll take a quick review of some of the recruitment and access systems that Kevin presented and that are important to overview on this work package. Then we're going to take a look at the initiatives that are taken on an institutional level and a national level to attract more students to STEM programs and engineering programs. Then we're going to take a look at the results of our field trials, more concretely our surveys that we presented to secondary students and also to freshman students. And finally, we'll present you what good practices and recommendations we had from some stakeholders and some concluding remarks. And then we'll have a period for questions if I don't take too long presenting the results of Work Package 7. So, reviewing the goals that we have for this work package, we want to interest young people in science, technology, and in engineering. We want to attract them to this kind of programs in higher education. And we also want to balance the gender in these programs, because typically, and I've shown some figures yesterday that show us that only about 30% of the graduate in these areas are female. So we need to increase those numbers, or we really would like to increase those numbers, and that could be a way to have more students in these areas. So we have 6 participant institutions in this work package. We have Aalto from Finland, we have IST from Portugal, Uppsala from Sweden, KU Leuven from Belgium, TCD from Ireland, and Torino from Italy. So just reviewing some aspects that Kevin already mentioned and detailed. The institutions don't have a lot of degrees of freedom to choose their own students, and they also have the numerous clauses in most of the countries, which is itself a restriction, especially because the numerous clauses is not defined exclusively by the institutions. It has a ministry that says what maximum of vacancies you can have in an institution. And most of the institutions, or most of the countries, they rely on the results from the secondary education to select the students for higher education, and most of them have the math results also to do this selection. So the first step we've taken on this work package was to take a look at the calendar of the recruitment activities that each institution had, also the calendar for the exams and the enrollment in each academic year. Why? Because as we can see from this picture, there are several differences between the countries in analysis, which actually impose some restrictions to how could we develop our field trials and to distribute the surveys to the students, especially the entered students. So this was important to look at before we started doing the rest of the plans. The second phase of this project, we wanted to analyze what kind of initiatives were taken in each country at an institutional level, and also what kind of initiatives were taken on to attract more girls to this kind of programs. These initiatives were collected among the partner universities, and they were collected in the period of about 2 years, which was between 2010 and 2011/12. So at the national level, there is a very common set of activities or projects that are meant to develop or interest younger students in science and technology. You know, they have science centers, they have teaching programs to, you know, have the secondary teaching staff, you know, more sensibilized to these kind of areas. They also have career guidance offices, like Kevin mentioned before. We have conferences, seminars, fairs at the national level. We also have websites and, you know, new ways of communicating with students more related to the new technologies. On an institutional level, we have the typical visits to secondary schools, which is an initiative that is very common in all the partner universities. We also have the open days when we invite the students to visit us and to get familiarized with the institution, the programs, to have some activities, to they understand what kind of actions or what they can expect when they come to university. There are also participation in fairs related to the dissemination of information about their programs. They have internships and they have summer programs to, you know, students can get acquainted to the university and the subjects that are addressed there. And finally, and this is a very important thing, the websites, because nowadays all students have access to internet and they value a lot the information there is on the website. And we'll see that further ahead. So specifically for girls, there are some partners who have specific initiatives, like summer courses, Girls Week Day or Week, mentoring programs, which are, you know, the kind of activities that try to convince girls to come to the universities and, you know, spend a little more time getting to know what kind of things they discuss in the programs. And this usually is done by other girls that are already in university, you know, like role models. So getting into the field trials, which was basically a set of questionnaires that we try to apply to every partner. Of course, that every partner had the liberty to adapt it to their own language and to their own reality. But there were a set of dimensions that we tried to keep it so that we can compare the results. There are also some countries that they have some results from surveys on the national level, and we try to use that also. So there were specific topics for freshman students, there were specific topics for secondary students, and there was a common set of questions that were addressed to both students. So when we're talking about the freshman students, we had the moment when the students decided to follow up on an engineering program, because that's important to us, because that helps us to know or to decide and orient our initiatives to attract them to higher education. On the secondary students, we decided to ask them when did they decided to follow up on to the university, more precisely engineering. And we also wanted to know what area of studies they were addressing in secondary education, because that's important, because if they have an opinion on engineering but they don't want to follow up on, or they are not attending S&T secondary tracks, I mean, they probably don't have a clear opinion or perception of what engineering is. So on the common topics of both questionnaires, we have the area of studies in secondary education, we have the parental background, specifically if the parents or at least one of the parents is or not an engineering. How do they feel about engineering? What kind of pay level they expect or they think they will have in engineering? How hard it is? What kind of effort it takes to do an engineering program? How is their perceptions about the access to the labor market once they have an engineering degree, and the recognition that they get from the employers. So to understand a little bit how this process was conducted in each country, we have here the results of each institution, what language was the questionnaire taken on. Most of the countries did it in its own language, with exception to Belgium and Ireland, which presented the questionnaire in English. Here we have the sample of secondary students, and here we have the percentage of girls. And here we have the sample, or the number of students that were sampled in the freshman students and the percentage of girls. We can see that we have different realities across the country, so in some cases we have lower numbers, so we have to be careful how we interpret the results. It's also funny to see that in the freshman students, the percentage of girls is not very high. It's very clear, it's very similar to the results I presented to you yesterday with the Eurostat students. You know, about 30%, 25 to 30% of the students are female. You know. So let's begin with the results and the graphics and the numbers. So first we're going to take a look at the secondary students' results. And here we can see that in Belgium, for instance, students feel that engineering requires a great deal of effort. In the other countries, the results are not so high. In Finland, they believe that engineering doesn't require a great deal of effort. When it comes to the difficulty of the engineering duties and the importance to the country development, we have Ireland and Belgium, which believe that it requires a great deal of effort and it's very important to the country development. And we have Finland and Portugal, who don't feel that much higher on these two topics. The decision of when should they take an engineering program, it's usually after 10th grade. So basically, not many students take this decision before the 10th grade, before they get into secondary school, which makes sense because, you know, they don't really know how well they will perform in secondary education, so they will decide on those 3 years based on their grades. And I'll show some more results that actually sustain this, this affirmation. The intent to pursue engineering, here we have Belgium, where many students that were inquired want to pursue engineering. In the other countries, the values are around 20%. So when we compare the results, the global results that were presented in the previous graphic with the percentage of females that actually have the same opinion, we can see that the results are very similar. You know, girls and the global population actually think alike, with exceptions for, you know, the importance to the country development here in Ireland, where girls feel that it's very much more important than the global population, and here in the Belgium that we have a different, a small difference of opinion in these two results. So when we asked the students what were the factors that actually influenced their decision to take on an engineering program or a degree in university, they all believe that it's very important, the mathematics, but it's also very important, the job opportunities and to obtain a qualification. And here, once again, you know, the perceptions of girls and boys are very similar. And here, oops, sorry, here we are. With exception here at the job opportunities in Portugal, where there's a huge gap between, you know, the global students and the percentage of girls who feel that that's an important factor. This probably has to do that women feel that they won't have so much opportunities in the job market. But I can't really explain it any better, this result, without, you know, presenting more results. So when we look at who actually influences and what are the major sources of information, we can see that the parents represent an important role in this. More in Portugal than, for instance, in Belgium. Former students tend to have an important role here too, especially for the girls in Portugal. Course handbooks also have an importance in Ireland and in Portugal, and the school visits actually have a very important part in this, especially in Portugal. So this is something we should actually continue to bet on because it really gets to the students. Showing you now some results about the freshman students at the universities of Sweden, Italy, Finland, Ireland, and Portugal. Well, we can see that the students who actually attend an engineering program believe that we'll have easy access to the labor market, that engineers require a great deal of effort, and that they are important to the country development. Here we can see there are some differences across the countries. For instance, the importance of the engineers to the country development is more important in Portugal, in Ireland. This probably has to do with the concept of engineering in the society as Mats presented in the first work package. Regarding to the background of the parents, about 20% of the parents have a background in engineering, with the exception to Finland, which actually has a higher percentage of parents who have an engineering degree. So here the parents' academic background is really important and determined to what the students actually follow in the future. So when we compare these results to the percentage of females who actually answer the same questions, we realize, for instance, that in Sweden, girls believe that engineering actually requires a lot of effort when compared to the global students. For instance, in Ireland, they don't think it requires such a great deal of effort. The parents' background in engineering is much more pronounced here in Finland that in the other countries, which is very similar between the girls and the global population. So when we look at the factors that actually influence their choices in going to an engineering program and to that institution, we see that mathematics has an importance, a high importance, but obtaining a qualification, further education, and job opportunities also. When it comes to girls, they actually have, they consider it much important that the global number of students. It's very related to what Kevin presented earlier, that, for instance, in Portugal, the results of chemistry and physics are important to access an engineering program, but in Ireland they aren't, because it is not considered like a prerequisite that they have to access an engineering program. And in Portugal, in most of the countries, actually, in most of the programs of engineering, it is. And this was collected last year, and so this year it's actually an imposition that every student who accesses an engineering program has to have chemistry and physics to access that, along with the mathematics. So this number will actually increase next year if we take a look at the numbers of this particular current year that we are now. So looking at the major influences in deciding to take up on an engineering program, we have again the parents, especially in Portugal. They are a major influence, especially to the girls. We have the friends, at least in Portugal and Sweden. In Ireland, they don't feel that that's an important source of information for their decision. Former students are also important, course handbooks also, and school visits, especially in Portugal. You know, yesterday in our corner of Work Package 7, we were discussing the importance of parents in their decisions and the children's decisions. And here it shows that actually that's a target we need to get to attract more students to engineering programs, because they have lots of influence in the students. But this is something that it's not easy to do, because how do we get to the parents? You know, how do we address the parents and invite them to come and know our programs and somehow convince their children to come to their programs? This is not easy. You know, one of the suggestions that was presented yesterday was to address the students not when they are in secondary education, but a little earlier, between the ages of 12 and 15, and invite the students along with the parents to visit the institutions and to get familiarized with the programs, because that way students can, you know, think about it for a long time. The parents can also think about it for a long time, and they can influence in the longer term notion. There's also another thing that's really important. It's the former students, for instance, here in Portugal, which means that we need to treat the students that we have nowadays, because they are going to influence the future students that we have. So they need to have a good experience at our institution. They need to be successful in engineering, because this will be the image that goes on to the future students. And we want it to be a good image and to have good role models in this area. So now I'm going to present some of the comparable results between the secondary students and the freshman students, so that we can see that there are some differences here in their opinions. For instance, when we take a look at the parents who have an engineering background and the students who want to pursue an engineering program but are still in high school, we can see that the students who are already at the university have a higher probability to have a parent with an engineering background than the students with, that are still in the secondary education but want to follow up on an engineering program. So the decision of the moment they decide to take an engineering program is also different between the secondary students and the students who are already in the university. This can be related to the fact that the students who are already in the university, they already went along to hold the process, so, and the other ones are still thinking about it. They don't really know if they want to go to engineering. It's going to depend on the grades they have along the secondary course. So here I present to you the students who actually believe, or the percentage of students who actually believe that engineering is very important to the country development. And once again, we see some differences between the secondary students and the secondary students and the freshman students, especially a huge difference in Portugal and in Finland, because students who are still in secondary school, they don't realize how important it is, the engineers, for the future country development. The students who are already in university, they have that perception more clear, because they have become in contact with that, because they probably have more information that they collected during the process of choosing which program they want to go to. The level of difficulty of the students, or the perception of the level of effort that it takes to take on an engineering program, is also very different among the students who are in secondary and university. For instance, the students who are already at university, they feel that it's very, very difficult. The students who are still in high school, they don't have that perception, with exception to the Ireland students who are at secondary education. So here is the results that are very similar to the previous ones, with a larger gap here in Finland secondary and entrant students. So the students who are still in secondary education, they don't feel that engineering is a well-paid profession. Maybe that's why they don't want to come to this profession, because, you know, most or a great part of their decision is based on the job opportunities and the employability and the perspectives of the future. So they don't feel it's well paid, especially here in Finland. So maybe that's something that we can, you know, clarify to the students and to show them the role models, and that their concept, their preconception of the payment in engineering, it's a little different that they think. Regarding the students believing or not that once they get an engineering degree, they will have easy access to the labor market. Once again, there are some differences among the countries. We don't have here this data for Finland. It's not 0%. But, you know, even in Portugal and in Ireland, there's a gap between this, you know, because maybe they don't have enough information. I know that in Portugal, we are, you know, betting on that area. We are giving up, you know, employability rates. It is mandatory that the institution have this data published on their website. There is national information, official information about this. We don't really know how how good the information is, but, you know, there is information and students use it to decide it. For instance, this year we had some problems with civil engineering because not only of the crisis that we have, but because the rates of unemployability in this area are huge. So when we compare the results from both systems, students, when it comes to the results of, when it comes to what they consider important in their decision to follow up on an engineering program, we see some differences here around the results. We see that mathematics and physics, for instance, is very important in Portugal, but for the secondary students, this is not so important. Obtaining a qualification, further education, and job opportunities are also important, especially for the girls in Ireland. Student life is also very important for the students who are still in secondary school, maybe because they want to go to the university not only to attend an engineering program, but also for the experience of being in a university. That's also important. And students who are already in the university, they are starting to focus on, you know, working to the first semester. That's when we ask them this. Finally, what kind of sources of information the students from the secondary and university systems use to rely on to make their choices? So once again, we have the parents, as very important. But we also have the course handbooks, the website, which actually has a really high importance here. So this is something we should actually bet on for the future, because it's not that expensive and it's easy to keep up the information in the website. The institution reputation is also very important for their decision. More to the students who are already in the system than for the secondary students. University visits, it's also important for the secondary students more than for the entered students. The fairs also have some importance, especially for the secondary students, maybe because these aspects here are more important to the secondary students because they are still in the process of making their decision, and the freshman students already went by that process, and so they don't have a clear view of how important it was along the 3 previous years. So finally, we had a meeting in Leuven not so long ago, and we talked to some of the stakeholders, and those stakeholders actually left some recommendations that we can use to discuss it here after the presentation is finished. Like we should develop resources to support key influences like, guidance counselors, mathematics and physics teachers to to explain to the students what engineering is and what is their importance to the country and why they should take on the engineering programs. You should also analyze what kind of initiatives have been successful or not to attract students to STEM studies. And when it comes to the institutional initiatives, we actually have some numbers that show us which ones are important or not. For instance, we know that the visits we do to schools and the open days that we have are very successful because students always say that it's very important in their decisions. But, for instance, on the national level, we don't really know the impact that those initiatives have. And, there should be more data about this. We also should identify best practices in recruiting and training teachers because, good teachers are a good image of the institution. It improves the prestige of the institution. But also, there are some teachers who go to the high schools and, they present engineering or their area of engineering to the students. So this is something that's also important. And it's also important to understand the importance of the peers as influencers. Because, I think that most of the secondary students don't realize how much they are influenced by their friends. We've seen the data before. They don't consider it very important. But they actually are very important. They just don't realize how important they are. And we also should, as I said before, make sure that the students who are now enrolled in our programs are successful and they have a good review of the program because that's the word they'll pass on to the next students. We should explore the use of engineering role models, especially female role models, because that will identify engineering as a not exclusive male profession. And we should explore the value of engineering as an education rather than a career. Finally, some good practices that we've identified along this project. The ways that we've identified to promote STEAM courses among the youngsters, like the visits to schools, the fairs, the website, support teachers training at the secondary education to be more sensitive about the S&T programs, especially the career guidance counselors, promotion of engineering role models, and increase the general public awareness of science and technology importance, because that's very related to what Matt's presented in Work Package 5. The society needs to understand the benefits of the engineering in the society and to have these role models in the news, because being in the news will influence not only the students, but will also influence the parents and the teachers who will influence the students too. So the main conclusions is that the picture of and the perceptions of engineering differ from country to country, at least at the countries that were presented or that were participating in this project. The opinion of female students tends to be in accordance with the male students in secondary schools, although they are more pessimistic about the contribution of engineers to the country development. The percentage of university entrants choosing after 10th grade is great. It's large because students haven't decided yet what they want to do after they finish secondary education until they get into the secondary education. And as Kevin presented before, that probably will be a little too late in some cases, because once they are in secondary education, then that they've decided to go to a certain pathway, then they can go back and they can not go to engineering. So I leave you with some issues for discussion here. How do you feel that Work Package 7 goals are important? How can they influence decision makers to the future and to attracting more students to these areas? What didn't we analyze or present it here that you feel that would be important to, discuss this subject, and any other suggestions that you have? So, thank you for listening. I'll be available for any questions that you have now. I'm going to leave the issues for discussion here in case you want to use any of them, to start the discussion. Thank you. Yes.
I mean, I wonder whether, the question you have, how may the work package results influence decision making? I guess this is a really important issue. Are we looking at trying to influence nationally, so within Portugal? And if it's not national, if it's across Europe, how do we do it? This is really quite in taking the work forward, whether it's from this project or other projects. So if you like, we've done analysis, maybe we have some examples of good practice, but how do we then, who is it that we're trying to influence, and how we do it is to me a really a subject worthy of a discussion when we have the opportunity to do that.
Well, I think that it's very important that in each country you have the goal of increasing students in engineering programs, because once you define that goal, you're going to define the set of actions to actually get there. So we are here discussing that we need more students to higher education engineering programs, but at the national level, the governments need to understand that, and they need to bet on that, and that will actually influence a lot of the decisions, like the number of vacancies that you have for engineering programs, if they should be raised up, or the kind of initiatives at the national level, because the institutions don't have a lot of degrees of freedom, deciding their programs. They can do these local initiatives, going to secondary schools and trying to attract students, and we are usually successful at that, and that means that we have more candidates, but there's a limit to the candidates that we will accept. So I think that the decision making on the top level, it needs to be done defining more overall goals that we want to increase higher education engineering students